We are anonymous. No faces, no flags, no permission slips. We exist where power assumes silence is permanent, where authority believes fear will outlast memory, and where institutions are quietly bent until they stop resisting. We speak when truth is treated like a threat, when accountability is locked behind steel doors, and when the law is rewritten in real time by those who think no one is watching. What you are about to hear is not rumor. It is not speculation. It is not outrage engineered for attention. It is a documented chain of events that begins with the killing of a woman named Renee Good and ends with Congress blindsiding Donald Trump and his administration through an emergency motion that shattered their attempt to bury the truth. Renee Good did not die as a headline. She did not die as a statistic. She was shot and killed by an ICE agent, Jonathan Ross, on January 6th in front of her wife Becca and their dog. A moment of irreversible violence carried out by a federal enforcement system that has grown increasingly insulated from scrutiny. And what followed that killing reveals the true priorities of the Trump administration. There was no pause for accountability, no immediate transparency, no serious effort to explain how a civilian ended up dead at the hands of an ICE agent. Instead, behind closed doors, the machinery of obstruction went into motion. Within days, not weeks, the administration was focused on one thing only: lock Congress out. 3 days after Renee Good was killed, in the middle of the night, a new order was issued. Quietly, without notice to lawmakers, without notice to the court, an order designed to continue blocking members of Congress from entering ICE facilities and detention centers in Minneapolis and across the country. No press briefing, no public justification, just a calculated move to shut the doors. That timing was not accidental. It was instinctive. Authoritarian systems do not respond to tragedy with reform. They respond with control. Members of Congress understood exactly what was happening. On an emergency basis, they rushed back to federal court in Washington, D.C., filing a motion before Judge G. Cobb. The goal was not political theater. It was constitutional survival. To stop the Trump administration, ICE, and Christine Noem from illegally blocking Congress from performing its lawful duty of oversight. This was not the first clash. Months earlier, 12 members of Congress had already sued when Christine Noem initially imposed a 7-day notice requirement and additional barriers to oversight visits. The strategy was familiar. Delay inspections, restrict access, shape what lawmakers are allowed to see. But the law was already clear. Under Section 527 of the Department of Homeland Security Appropriations Law, in effect since 2020, Congress explicitly prohibited DHS from using any appropriated funds to block members of Congress or their staff from entering DHS facilities for oversight. Detention centers, processing facilities, offices. The statute leaves no room for interpretation. The Trump administration tried to manufacture one anyway. They argued they were not using Section 527 funds. They claimed they were relying on money from a separate budget bill, as if federal agencies operate with cleanly separated wallets, as if courts have never seen this maneuver before. Judge Cobb rejected it outright. She ruled that the 7-day notice policy violated the Administrative Procedures Act and directly contradicted Section 527. Unless the government could prove that no Section 527 funds were being used, the policy was invalid. Full stop. That ruling should have ended the matter. Then January 6th happened. Renee Good was killed. 2 days later, on January 8th, the new policy was drafted and issued. The same 7-day notice requirement, the same ICE approval mechanisms, the same obstruction, just repackaged with a promise that this time the money would come from somewhere else. The Department of Justice did not immediately inform the court. They did not immediately inform Congress. They waited until January 10th, quietly filing a notice and attaching the new policy as if it were routine. As if the judge would not notice the timing, as if no one would connect the dots. But Congress did not wait. 3 members of Congress representing districts in and around Minneapolis showed up to conduct oversight just hours after Renee Good's death. They entered the facility. They saw detainees being processed. They observed roughly 20 people being held. They were told 2 planes were scheduled to leave that day, transferring detainees to other facilities inside the United States. They asked whether those were deportation flights. They were told no. They asked about showers. They were told showers existed but were not shown them. They asked about hygiene products. They were told detainees were not held long enough to need them, a claim contradicted by accounts from people previously detained at the same facility. Then the door slammed shut. ICE agents informed them they could no longer continue, that they were no longer allowed to fulfill their constitutional duties. That oversight was now prohibited. That was the moment the truth surfaced. There was a policy, a hidden policy, issued 2 days after Renee Good was killed, designed not to protect lives but to block witnesses. This is how cover-ups work, not by erasing evidence, but by controlling access to it. The emergency motion filed in response pulls no punches. It demands a full accounting, not reassurances, not promises, not carefully worded memos. A dollar-by-dollar breakdown of every resource used to create, develop, communicate, and implement the new policy. Every salary, every expense, every piece of technology, every security system, every administrative action. Because the law is merciless. If even $1 of Section 527 money touched this process, the policy is illegal. If one staffer's time was paid with restricted funds, if one database or email system was supported by the wrong appropriation, if one tracking mechanism crossed accounts, the entire policy collapses, and this is where the administration's panic becomes visible. Federal agencies do not operate with surgical financial separation. Salaries overlap, infrastructure is shared, systems are integrated, and this policy was rushed out in days, under pressure after a killing. The idea that every dollar could be perfectly segregated is not credible. The emergency motion states plainly that the defendants have not shown that no Section 527 funds were used. They made no real attempt to prove it, because proving it would require transparency they are desperate to avoid. To comply with the law, they would have needed to ensure that every person involved in drafting the policy was paid exclusively from non-Section 527 funds, that every tool used to track compliance was funded separately, that even the systems tracking the accounting were themselves properly funded. $1 out of place ends the argument. This is why the administration clings to the 7-day notice rule, not for safety, not for coordination, but for control. 7 days to prepare, 7 days to move detainees, 7 days to sanitize conditions, 7 days to turn oversight into a guided tour instead of an inspection. They claim it is about protecting members of Congress. But protection does not require secrecy. Obstruction does. This pattern extends far beyond ICE. Inspectors general are fired when they investigate. Courts are challenged when they rule. Journalists lose access when they ask questions. Congress is locked out when it demands answers. And when someone dies, the response is not accountability, but containment. That is why this emergency motion matters, not because it is dramatic, but because it exposes how power behaves when it is cornered. Democracy Forward stepped in to represent the 12 members of Congress. The ACLU joined the fight. Democratic attorneys general across the country coordinated their efforts. The majority of serious legal challenges to the Trump administration now converge around the same themes: abuse of power, obstruction of oversight, contempt for the law. The administration wants this story to be about budgets, about accounting technicalities, about procedural noise, because it cannot afford for it to be about what it really is, a system that responded to a killing by trying to hide. Renee Good's name now sits at the center of this fight. Because her death triggered a reflex the administration could not control, and that reflex exposed them. Donald Trump built his political identity on the belief that intimidation equals authority, that institutions will flinch if pushed hard enough, that fear can replace legitimacy, but fear collapses when it collides with law. Congress brought the law back into court on an emergency basis, and that blindsided Trump. Because he cannot override a statute written in plain language, he cannot retroactively legalize illegal spending, he cannot permanently lock Congress out, and he cannot stop oversight forever. We are anonymous. We see the panic. We see the midnight orders. We see the locked doors and hidden policies. Renee Good's death exposed more than a single act of violence. It exposed a system that treats accountability as an enemy. Now the question belongs to the public. Will this moment fade, or will it force change? Pay attention. Share this. Refuse to look away. Because silence is what power is counting on.